Hey y'all, what's happening? Chinese here, also known as China L. Colston, actress and independent filmmaker. I'm here in Brooklyn and I'm joined by Sergio Mims in Chicago, and we will have our film reaction to a classic film, A Man Called Adam, starring Sammy Davis Jr., Lee Tyson, Ozzie Davis, and Louis Armstrong, and Frank
George Kirby.
Sinatra,
I'll explain to you.
Frank Sinatra
No, Frank
Jr.
Sinatra Jr. Right. Frank Sinatra Jr., George Kirby. I'll explain who he was. Mel Torme. Gosh, there's a whole bunch of people in that film, and I'll get into that because they're all people from that era, entertainers from that era.
Mm-hmm. This is this is on IMDb. This is the actual movie poster, starring a wonderfully triple threat talented Sammy Davis Jr. Rest in peace to him.
Well, he was more than triple. He can do a whole lot of things.
He was like a quadruple threat.
Well, he's even more than that.
Oh, and I must mention that Janet Dubois from from Good Times was in it. She's so beautiful, and Lola Falana was in it as well.
That's right.
So I'm going to read from IMDb the synopsis. The synopsis says, a famous jazz trumpeter finds himself unable to cope with the problems of everyday life. It was directed by Leo Penn and written by Lester Pine and Tina Pine. Also, they wrote Claudine. Okay.
Right.
So, Sergio, you want to go ahead and start with your reaction and why we chose to discuss this film, A Man Called Adam?
Yeah, because one, it's a really good film. Two, it's a really interesting picture and a movie that's really unusual for its time and period for a whole bunch of reasons. It was independently made, independently produced and distributed. Now, it wasn't done by a major studio. I mean, you could tell on a low budget. No major studio would touch a film like this. Right, it tells the story of the downfall of a self-destructive jazz trumpeter played by Sammy Davis Jr., who has a lot of problems, a lot of issues. Doesn't have a happy ending.
No.
But it's one of those movies that's maybe kind of hard to watch because it is a depressing movie,
Yes.
But it's a movie that lately, in the last few years, has been rediscovered. It's been kind of ignored for a while, and for a while it was shown a lot on TV. That's when I first saw it, maybe many years ago, many years ago on TV. I know TCM, Turner Classic Movie, showed about a month ago, and put in a plug. It's coming out next week on Blu-ray for the first time on wrong label, Kino Lober, and I do a commentary for that movie. It's one of those films that I get offered a lot. I turned down one yesterday, the one that had no interest in, but this one was fascinating because it's a fascinating picture. The director, Leo Penn, to give you a little bit of background about him, is the father of the actor Sean Penn.
What?
And he was a director. He was blacklisted during the 1950s. What I mean by that is the whole Red Scare, the House of, the Congressional Panel, the House of Un-American Activities, which they went around trying to find people who were communists or communist subversives or had leanings with the Communist Party, and many people who worked in the film business, entertainment business, were banned from working. I mean, if you were blacklisted, as it was called, your name was put in a book called Red Channels. It's a real book. It was sent out to movie studios and producers and TV stations, and we're talking about late 40s to the mid 50s. And if your name was in that book, that means that the government thought that you were a subversive and no one will hire you. Now, the only way to get out of it was that you had to either be a friendly witness, which means you had to testify
Drop a
and give,
dime.
yeah, and give names. You had to squeal on somebody, or if you refused, you didn't work. Now there were directors. Leo Penn was one of them. He refused to name names. He wouldn't do it. There were other directors who refused to name names, like Joseph Losey, Jules Dassin, and they went to Europe. They had to go to Europe, and they made their careers there. And there were other people who
Europe is
named,
always a refuge, huh?
yeah, and there were other people who named names, like Elia Kazan named names, one of the greatest film directors ever, named names, and stage directors. Actors such as Burl Ives, Sterling Hayden, the actor. There were Jerome Robbins, the choreographer, who did the choreography for West Side Story.
Right.
But he named names because he had been blacklisted. People who were blacklisted, you had to make a decision, and some were scared, some wanted to keep working. But anyway, Leo Penn was blacklisted. He didn't name names. He couldn't work for a long time. And eventually by the 60s, he began to start working again. He made this movie, but he did a lot of television, particularly in the 70s and 80s. He directed a lot of episodic television. Did not direct many movies at all. This is one of the maybe one or two feature films that he directed. But he worked a lot in television. That was his main thing, television. And right, he is the father, or was the father, he's passed away now. He was the father of the actor Sean Penn. And like I said,
let me also say this, that this film was released in 1966, a year after Malcolm X was assassinated. So go ahead.
Right. And and I said, Cicely Tyson plays the love interest.
Yes.
Right. Jeanette Dubois has an early film role, who was a dancer. Actually, in my commentary, I talk about their backgrounds. Lola Falana, who had an affair with Sammy Davis Jr., I think around the time this movie was being made.
She did?
Oh, yeah. Now, Sammy Davis Jr., I go a lot into his background. He's a really fascinating guy. There is a biography out on him, but it's not very good. It really isn't. There needs to be another one, which is much better written. But to give you, who doesn't know who he is? I mean, when I was in the 60s, the 70s, the 80s, the 90s, he was ubiquitous. He was everywhere. He was in movies. He was a ton of television, TV commercials, Vegas, Broadway. He did everything. He wasn't like a quadruped. He was a multi-talented guy. He was a singer, a dancer, a musician. He played several instruments. He was a really good, serious actor. You can see
outstanding actor.
Right. He was one of the fastest draws in the world. I mean, like pulling out the gun and drawing out the gun. He was one of the fastest. And the reason he did that was he saw a guy do it, and he trained himself how to do it even faster. He was also a really great impressionist. Now, here's a funny thing. When he started his act, he would, let me give you some background about him. I think he was born in 1925. His father was Black. His mother was Afro-Cuban, okay? Now, for many, many years, he claimed his mother was Puerto Rican. The reason he claimed that was because, remember, 1950s, Castro, the Cuban Revolution, he kind of thought it would hurt him if he said he was if he was part Cuban. Puerto Rican was safer, okay? But his mother was Afro-Cuban. He only went to school one day in his life. That is true. He only went to school one day in his life.
At what age?
He was it was like the third grade. He was performing since the age of 3. He was a performer.
Yes.
His mother was a dancer. He was a performer, and he just performed. He never went to school except for one day. He said that himself. I only went to school one day in my life.
Was he self-taught? Was he? I mean, did he read? Did he like educate himself?
Well, you know, there's a weird thing. I have read some things that he couldn't read very well, but I know people who say that that's not true. You know, he taught himself. You know, he did
I
a
mean,
lot.
he had to read. He had to read the script to
He
memorize
had to
it.
because he did everything. He did everything.
Yeah.
He had to. There's no way he could have survived without reading.
No, you
Um,
can't act without knowing how to read.
So he performed. He worked with his uncles, the Will Maston trio. Now I have to explain something. Will Maston he was performed with his father. Okay, his father was a performer, and they traveled all over the country, the Chitlin circuit and everywhere performing. And a guy came along by the name of Will Maston. And Will Maston saw this kid and his father, and became part of the group. And part of it was that Davis had to call him his uncle. He was not his uncle. But Sammy Davis Jr. always called him my uncle Will Maston. It was not true. But it was part of the routine, like here's a kid and his father and his uncle performing, okay? Eventually what happened was that by the mid-50s, Sammy Davis Jr. was so talented and he was so outblew anybody that he went his own way and separate, okay? And as you know, he lost an eye in a car accident around 1956. Yeah, 56.
Okay.
He lost a kind of car accident. He was driving. It's a horrible accident. He was driving somewhere, and at the time they had those big steering wheels and the big thing in the middle, and his face smashed against it, and he lost an eye. And around that, at the same time, he converted to Judaism. Now, the story behind that was that one of his closest friends at the time was Jeff Chandler. And Jeff Chandler's forgotten now, but Jeff Chandler was a very, very popular actor in the 1950s. He was a big movie star. He had premature gray hair. If you look up movies, look at his picture. And Jeff Chandler was not his real name. You know, I mean, like a lot of movie stars, especially the Jewish name, you would change it. But they were close friends. And when Jeff Chandler found out that Davis had been in an accident, he went and he saw him, and he put in his hand a Star of David that he had. And according to Davis, he kept holding that Star of David even during the operation, you know. And he said permanent scars in his hand. And after that, he converted to Judaism.
Okay. Okay.
Now Davis was married to Lorraine White.
He was married 4 times?
He was married 3 times.
3 times, okay.
His first wife was Lorraine White, okay, who was black. His second wife was Mae Britt, who was white, okay? And that was very, very controversial at the time. They were married for about 15 years, something like that.
Oh, wow.
And it was very controversial. And Mae Britt was German. She was an actress. At the time, she was under contract to 20th Century Fox. She had been in the film movies, such as a remake of The Blue Ranger. She was in The Young Lion. She's very statuesque, you know, very like Amazon built, very statuesque. And that ended her career.
Really?
Know? Of course. At that time, in the 1950s, a white woman married to a black man, that's it. It's over. It's over. It's over for her. It was over for Mae Britt. Now, you know, supposedly the greatest love in his life was Kim Novak, the actress, who was a big, big star in the 50s, 60s, and the 50s and 60s. Big, big star. Also very tall, very Amazon. I guess he liked that type. And look up Kim Novak. She was a big movie. So she's still alive. I think she's like in her late 80s now. But they had this torrid affair. And at the time, she was under contract to Columbia Pictures for many years. And when the head of Columbia Pictures, Harry Cohn, found out, he called some of his mob buddies. And they took, this was after Sammy Davis had his accident, and they took Sammy Davis Jr. from his home, took him out to the desert, and they held us some kind of pointed stick to his good eye, and they said, "You want to lose your other eye? You drop Kim Novak." Okay, and that's true. That's been documented, right?
Whoa.
So then eventually he married his third wife, who's Al Travis, who was also black, right? I think she's still alive. Yeah. But Sammy Davis Jr. was complex as anybody. Somebody once said to me that Sammy Davis Jr. was the only guy who could go to Vegas to do a 4-week gig for $100,000 a week, and when he left, he was $250,000 in the hole.
Because
he spent everything. He spent money like crazy, and gambled a lot. You know, there was a bad time when he became a bad cocaine addict, you know. And here's the other thing that really, so I don't recall if I mentioned this in my commentary, but there was a point, get ready, there was a point that Sammy was into satanic rituals. He was Satanist.
What?
Yep. Oh yeah, absolutely true. Absolutely true. Absolutely. He got involved in it. And like a lot of movie stars did. And he became a very close friend of Anton LaVey. Now, who is Anton LaVey? Anton LaVey was back in the 60s and 70s, he was like the big Satanist in the United States, the head of the Church of Satan. And the reason I remember him, he used to be on talk shows all the time. You know, he had the shaved head and the goatee mustache. And he used to be on talk shows, you know, and, you know, talking about, he was like a celebrity. And Sammy Davis Jr. was a very close friend of his. There is a picture of them together. You can look it up.
What made Sammy go such an extreme direction from Judaism to Satanism?
Well, he never let Judaism. Well, you know, there's always been questions about Sammy Davis Jr. You know, did he do this to try to to get himself more into Hollywood? They were into it. I'm into it. You know, some people have said that. Is it just his natural curiosity? Is he a guy who was always searching for himself, a guy who never could figure out exactly who he was or where he fit in? Eventually, he did leave the Church of Satan, but he did make an album, and in one of the songs, Anton LaVey co-sings with him. You know,
that's a good segue to how he experienced inner turmoil in A Man Called Adam.
Yeah.
That's a good segue to that movie.
Yeah, because one of the things about that movie, which makes it, well, no, you go ahead. You talk first. I talked enough. You go ahead and talk about the.
Well, I was introduced to the movie in 2010. Again, a sidewalk DVD vendor in Manhattan, and you know, he basically pushed that film because I wanted to see a Sammy Davis film, and I bought the DVD and I watched it, and I was like so enamored by Sammy Davis Jr.'s acting.
Mm-hmm.
And I had never seen Cicely Tyson, quite frankly, as a love interest that was not waiting in the water, no disrespect. But, you know, she wasn't like, wait, you know, she wasn't playing somebody so heavy who was dealing with oppression, like so blatantly. So it was nice to see her in portraying a sensual, soft-spoken, but direct and smart, flirtatious love interest. I mean, to see, this is nice. So they filmed it, I'm thinking in 1965, it was released in 66. She was this dark chocolate woman with beautiful ebony eyes, rocking a short, close, natural haircut.
And that was really
cool. So he's dark skinned, she's dark skinned, and she's playing his love interest, and she wowed him, and he was transfixed by her personality and her beauty. I'm like, wow, that was pretty progressive, right? Go ahead, Sergio.
Yeah, I mean, the director, she was a natural. She at the time she was always wearing a short natural, and she was on a TV show called she became a name when she did a TV show in the 60s just before then called The East Side, West Side, with George C. Scott, long before he did Patton began movies. George C. Scott, in which she played a well, actually, her character progressed because it was a TV show back when they did a lot of TV shows in New York, and he played a social worker. And at the beginning of the season, she was his secretary. By the end of the season, she had become a social worker too. Now, maybe you'll be able to find episodes on YouTube, probably, but she had that short natural, and that caused a huge row at the time. I remember writing about this, that, and of course, especially from Black people, Black women, the fact that she wore a short natural. Remember, this is 1964.
So this is pre Black Panther, right? Before they start.
64, 65, when that show came out. And Black people were really upset. How dare you make us look ugly, wearing that ugly nappy hair?
But Sergio, too, I saw a documentary on Cicely Tyson's acting journey, and in the documentary it stated that she cut off her hair for a character in a play.
Yeah, the Blacks. It was probably for the Blacks. It was probably for that play. That's what got her name, right? The John Janae Black, which I've never seen, but yeah, it was called The Blacks, which played for a year on Broadway. A lot of actors we know today came from that play. Cicely Tyson, Jason Jones, Roscoe Lee Brown. I think Billy D. Williams was in it. You know, a lot of people were in that play. Right.
So back to A Man Called Adam. So Sammy Davis Jr.'s character was such an a-hole to her, and such an a-hole to her father, who played by
Louis Armstrong.
Louis Armstrong.
Yeah, Louis Armstrong. Right.
But he was conflicted because of his past, of the death that he caused of his wife and his child in a car accident, right? And he survived. Right. But one of his bandmates became blind as a result of his driving. He was Johnny Brown was
also on Good Times.
Yes, he played Bookman on Good Times.
Right.
Sammy Davis Jr. character was the only character. Adam, I'll just keep saying Sammy Davis. Sammy Davis character was the only person who came out of the accident unscathed. So he walked around with this heavy guilt, which spilled over into his playing, and it spilled over into his attitude, his nasty interaction towards some of the customers and some of his bandmates. But you don't discover that until you get towards the end of the film or the middle of the film.
Right.
When him and Cicely Tyson go to a cabin, once he thaws out, and because he's mean to her father, and but her warmth defrosts his heart. And he began to respect and like her, and he becomes intrigued by her, and she him, because he's like this bad boy, and she's like this civil rights activist, like turning the other cheek, and he's like, that's some bullshit. I'm not turning the other cheek for nobody, right? So he was that man. Yeah, like, I'm not about that. Turn of the cheek. I'm about that an eye for an eye, right? I'm about that.
Yeah, look what happened in the scene with the cabin, right? What happens? Police come around, and they wind up arresting him, thinking that he's a squatter there, right? Mm-hmm. And they show them how bad he's still still in there, right? That's one of that scene. It's really deep scene. And the fascinating thing about this picture is that, okay, and this is one that goes to scenes, who was the biggest Black star? You can make the argument the only Black movie star at that time.
Was it Sammy Davis Jr. or Eartha Kitt?
Oh, come on. No. Who's the biggest Black movie star at that time?
Sidney Poitier.
Right. Okay. So Sidney Poitier, a lot of people criticized him for that his characters were always too perfect. Like in Guess Who's Coming to Dinner, like in The Heat of the Night. like in Lilies of the Field, like in Patch of Blue. His characters were always perfect. You know, they were almost saint-like. And the rationale behind that was that, well, Sidney Poitier was always careful about the parts he picked. He was very careful.
Yes.
And he, of course, what he wanted to do was to avoid the stereotypes that you have seen of black men and black women in movies for decades, since the beginning of movies, right? He wanted to avoid that. Now, you can make the argument that maybe he strayed a bit too far and his characters were so unnaturally perfect, they were unreal. But you can see where he was coming from. And also the other thing you have to keep in mind was that civil rights groups at the time, such as the NAACP, you know, the Urban League, you know, civil rights leaders and people who were involved in the movement, they liked Sidney Poitier because he was basically showing to white people that, see, we're not scary. They
were the one enacting violence. Why do we have to prove that we're not scary? They should be trying to prove they're not scary.
Well, remember the times. Remember the times. Don't think about it today. Think about the attitude back then. Don't you see? People always get twisted because you think about, well, it's not that it's different. It was different back then. It was very different. You know, it's just like I think we talked about Sylvie's Love. We talked about Sylvie's Love last time, and I said, you know, people, my generation, look at that movie and say, we get it. That's a generation of our parents, right? Mm-hmm. You know, generation who first were able to integrate in mass into the mainstream society. So the rule was that, you know, are you ready? Are you ready now to be integrated? Are you ready? Don't act like a Negro now. Are you ready? Do you know what silverware? Do you know what fork to use? Do you know how to speak correctly? Don't act, what's the phrase used to do? You know, remember to act your age and not your color. Are you ready? That's why in Sylvie's Love, the mother of Sylvie, mm-hmm. It has a etiquette, you know, class, you know. That was a big deal back then. That was huge. Now, younger people, they'll go right past them. But back in the day, that was a huge thing. There were many women who had these etiquette classes teaching young Black girls how to act in polite society.
Yeah.
You know, because are you ready? Are you ready?
So Sammy Davis' character didn't care about fitting in.
That's the point. That's the point. Right? His character is flawed. His character is very flawed.
Very interesting.
Right. Okay, that's interesting to us, but that was a real risk take. That was very risk-taking at the time. Very risky.
He was very transparent and he was very honest.
Right. To play a Black character who is very flawed. He's not perfect like Harry.
No.
Yeah, he's very flawed. Yeah. And there's some incredible scenes in that movie. Like when he goes to see Peter Lawford. He goes to see Peter Lawford and he finds out that Peter Lawford can't make a deal he wants, his agent. He makes him crawl on his knees. Okay. But then what happens later on? He then reverses and then is forced to crawl on his knees to get a favor from Peter Lawford later in the picture. I'm sure Black people were cheering at the earlier scene, and I bet Black people just groaning, you know, at the second scene where he goes on his knees.
Can we take a moment of silence for Lester and Tina Pine, the screenwriters? Screenwriting masters, Lester and Tina Pine. Adam and Claudine. Like, by the way, phenomenal.
By the way, that reminds me. I posted it on my Facebook page. I came across, or a friend of mine came across a Chicago newspaper ad from August of 1974. Okay, it's a newspaper ad for the Chicago downtown theaters. Okay, at the time they were owned by the Plitt Company. So all these, they're all gone now, almost all gone. Like the State Lake, The Chicago Theater is still there. State Lake Chicago Theater, the Roosevelt United Artists, you know. And in August of 1974, downtown Chicago, there were 5 major movie theaters. 3 of them were showing Black films. One was showing Claudine at United Artists. The other one was showing Three the Hard Way. And then at the Roosevelt and Chicago Theater, it was showing 9th straight week. It was showing Uptown Saturday Night. Now, here's the thing. I tell people. And then the other theater was showing Death Wish. And then, but here's the thing, right? Mm-hmm. Okay, listen, even if there were movie theaters today, name me another time when you could go and see movies like that today.
I cannot name it.
You can't. You know, and that's 1974. And then you see what else was showing in 1974 that year, it will blow your minds. I mean, you think of all the extraordinary movies that came out in 1974. It doesn't even match. They doesn't even come close to what's coming out today. I don't care if it's in theaters. I don't care if it's streaming. I don't care anywhere. It's not even close.
It's, you know what, too? The Cicely Tyson character in this film, her name was... Where's Mama Cicely Tyson? She should be like the third. Claudine.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, so Cicely Tyson, he was like, I'm not some charity case. You can't change me, baby. You can't change me. I'm actually no good for you. You should just leave me alone. And that just made him even more magnetic to her. You know, we're all like fix and mend men. That we find,
I'm going to make this man. Yeah, right.
Yeah, hey, and he was like, stay away, and she just couldn't stay away.
Well, you know, and then what happens? You know, it's like it's like I said, it's a really fascinating picture about a flawed person.
Yeah.
And he's not supposed to be likable. He is not. You know, and that's a big risk for Sammy Davis Jr., who did get a lot of lead roles. You know, he did a lot of TV.
He's magnificent.
A lot of movies, but you know, he basically got supporting roles. Now in television, occasionally he will get a lead role in a TV movie, or he will be the special guest star in a TV show. He did that a lot.
He should have had at least 3 Oscars. At least 3 Oscars.
Well, he didn't do that much.
Costa. He should have got an Oscar for A Man Called Adam. I don't give a shit who he was up against. I'm sorry, but that interpretation was so layered, so emotionally diverse. Like he was magnificent.
Mm-hmm. But he didn't get that many opportunities to show that. He didn't. He just didn't. You know.
He didn't even get nominated for an Oscar, which is crazy.
Well, they were nominated for what?
For A Man Called Adam.
Well, they weren't going to nominate a film like that.
But I'm not nominating his performance.
They're not going to nominate a film like that because it was a small independent movie. They were going to ignore that film.
Claudine was a small independent film.
Which one?
Claudine was a small independent film, and she got nominated.
No, but that was a studio picture. That was Fox.
Oh, okay.
That was 20th Century Fox movie. And 20th Century Fox, no doubt, had a big promotional push on that film for her. There was nothing like that for A Man Called Adam, which was released by Embassy Pictures, which is a small distribution company at the time, run by Joseph E. Levine. Okay. It wasn't going to happen. Wasn't going to happen.
Oh.
You know?
Did he get nominated for a BAFTA? No.
No. I don't even know if it even played in England. I'm not sure.
Okay.
You know, and a lot of the movies he made or appeared in, you know, like Salt and Pepper, they're kind of crappy. You know, I mean, he just didn't get the opportunities. Maybe that's one reason why he's so good in the film and on Lucasta, because he kind of know, you know, this is not going to come around very often. This is not. So you better take it for everything you can get.
But you can tell that Sammy Davis Jr., his preparation for these characterizations must be so in depth.
No, he didn't have to prepare at all because that was him.
But regardless of that, when they wrote that character, they didn't write Sammy Davis. He still had to interpret the character, and what he delivered was astonishing. Like both characters are very complicated.
I'm not trying to say it was lesser, but he grew up in that life. He that was him, and he knew people like that.
Yeah.
I
But
mean,
not
he
everybody can interpret that in acting.
um
Some people may have that very life, but they're not good actors. So you still
no,
have to
but
interpret.
he was one of those rare talents who could do anything. He
Yes.
really he was one of those rare talents who could do anything. I would say that for a lesser talented person. I wouldn't
Mhm.
say that for him. He just never really got the opportunity to show in terms of dramatic acting, that
Mhm.
kind of thing. Most of the stuff he did was kind of lame, comedies and
Yeah.
where he basically played a version of himself,
Mhm.
um, I don't know what else to say. I mean, it just didn't happen for him. Now he had this extraordinary decades long career. I mean, I think he died at the age of 65. I mean, this is a guy who for 6 decades, literally for 6 decades,
Wow.
performed. And
Yeah.
also I think he was an impressionist. There's a scene in the movie where he's at a party,
Mhm.
and there are a couple people there who are other people in the show business now who kind of forgotten now, like Mel Torme, who
Mhm.
was maybe Frank Sinatra's rival, is in there.
Okay.
Jackie Leonard. Nobody remembers Jackie Leonard anymore. Jackie Leonard, he's the big guy who's bald with glasses. Well, I'm talking about me.
Okay.
Um, like, and he's like, Jackie Leonard was a comedian. He was really popular when I was a kid, but he was an insult comedian, like Don Rickles. He was an insult comedian, okay?
Uh-huh.
And then there's George Kirby. And George Kirby appears in the film. He's like singing along. He's like the big, heavy-set black guy. He appears in a couple of shots. George Kirby's interesting because George Kirby is sort of following into the tradition of Sammy Davis Jr. because he was also a multi-talented guy. He was a singer. He was a stand-up comic. He was an impressionist. Now, here's the thing about doing an impression. This sounds crazy now, but when Sammy Davis Jr. did impressions, um, it was considered scandalous because
Why?
a black man is not supposed to impersonate white celebrities. Not supposed to do it. At that time, you
Kobe
weren't supposed to do it.
also.
And Sammy Davis Jr. told a story that when he was performing with his uncles, I mean, with his fake uncle and his father, and then he started doing impressions like Cary Grant or Cagney and all these actors. They took him backstage and said, "Don't you ever do that again. Don't you ever do that again. You're going to get killed." It was considered like really offensive. Okay. Now he kept doing it. Okay. And if you want to see something interesting, go on YouTube. And there was a show at the time called What's My Line?
Yes.
Okay.
Mhm.
And What's My Line was a hugely popular show, like from the 50s into the late 60s. And the gimmick was that somebody would come on and you had to guess what they did for a living, asking yes and no questions. And he always had some kind of really weird job, like a guy who owned a nudist colony or something like that. The final person will always be a celebrity.
Yes.
Okay.
Mhm.
So a celebrity would come out, and then the contestants had to be blindfolded, right?
Yes.
And a lot of times the celebrity, because the voice was so recognizable, they try to disguise their voice. So
Ah.
there's one where Sammy Davis Jr. comes out and he starts doing these impressions. He starts doing Cary Grant and Cagney and James Stewart. And they couldn't figure out who it is. Eventually they get it. Eventually they do at the end. Okay. Somebody finally figures out Sammy Davis Jr. because they're doing impressions. But for a long time, they can't figure out who it is because it sounds like Cary Grant. No, it's James Cagney. No, I mean, because Davis is doing these incredible impressions.
He was so
And
gifted.
right. And at the time, it was still considered controversial for a black man to do an impression of of now this is really weird because white guys were doing like these comic stereotype impressions of black people and they thought that was really funny.
Of course they did.
But for a black man to do an impression of white celebrities, that was considered beyond the pale for a lot of people. Remember, it's a different time back then, you know. Don't think about it now, what's going on now. Think about it back then.
It pisses me
You know,
off. It's like, who are you? Who are you? You think you're better than us? You're not
well,
better
that
than
was
us.
Yeah, um
It makes me angry.
it's amazing. It's amazing what, and I was just talking to a friend of mine today about this.
Yeah.
It's amazing what you could do back then that you can't do today. People think it's the reverse, and now you can do anything. But no, back then there were things you could not. I mean, there were things you could do back then that you could not do today. Okay, and or things that were considered um
Yeah,
really beyond the pale that today nobody would even think about.
you know what this reminds me of when you like, Sammy Davis Jr., they were telling him you can't do these impressions of these Caucasian entertainers. However, y'all can do blackface of black entertainers and black people. Now I know I'm going, this is prior, but I'm just saying like you can mock and do impressions of black entertainers, but black entertainers can't do that to you, right?
Right.
With racism. And it kind of it makes me think about Toni Morrison, the great Toni Morrison, rest in peace to this wonderful novelist. She was on Charlie Rose's show and he was interviewing her and he was like, she said something like, you know, what she said something like, what the white racist people, what would you do if you didn't have racism? Like, would you feel would you not feel powerful? You would just feel
Oh,
alone.
they will find
She was
something.
like you, she was like, without racism, you feel like nothing. You feel like nothing. Without that, you are nothing. So how does it make you feel? You only feel tall if you stand on. I mean, I'm not eloquent like her, but the way she articulated her point of view, whoo, I was like, man, Toni Morrison was no joke. She was no joke.
And Sammy took a lot. He took a lot from white people, took a lot from black people. Back in the 70s when he supported Richard Nixon. And that was very controversial. So did James Brown. But
Why
yeah,
did they do it? Why did they support them? Was it for the economic gain? Why did they do
I
it?
don't know. I
Okay.
don't know. I don't know.
Okay.
You have to ask him.
Okay.
Well, you can't.
That's
But
fair.
I don't know. But I remember he got a lot of grief when he supported Richard Nixon in the 70s. Got a lot of grief. Now compared to Trump, Richard Nixon looks very tame, but very tame. But it's a real showcase for him. Let's just end it with this. And it's a real showcase for him, and it gives you a real idea and some idea of what a phenomenal talent he was. I fear that he's now been forgotten. Well, particularly younger people don't know who he was, but he was so he was everywhere. And I mean, I remember the TV commercials he did for Manischewitz wine, Manischewitz. I'm sure you can find it on YouTube. As a matter of fact, just go on YouTube. You can find a lot of stuff on Sammy Davis Jr. stuff he did. And they're not any really Sammy Davis Jr.'s anymore. They're not.
No, I agree. You know what I appreciate about A Man Called Adam was the complexity of his character, because yes, when we first were introduced to him, we see he's this very gifted trumpeter, jazz trumpeter. He's the leader of the band, and he was like, I don't want the audience member telling me what to play. That's for me to decide. That's not for the audience to have that power to tell me what to play. Melancholy Baby. It's like, no, I determine that. That's not for them. And this bandmates is like, no, the audience, they pay our salary. So we need to come. This is a nice jazz club. They pay our salary. You need to just comply. And he was like, no, I'm not going to comply. I'm the musician. I create the music. You don't tell me what music to play. And I like that he had some guts and he had courage, but he was also warm when he finally warmed up to Cicely Tyson's character. He showed such a warm and gentle and loving side to her.
Yeah, well, I forgot. The movie is supposed to be based on Miles Davis.
I felt that too.
Yeah. And who was Miles Davis married to at one time?
Cicely Tyson.
Of course. I think she was his Third wife, right?
Because he was married to a
Third.
dancer out of Chicago too.
Well, yeah, that was the dancer, right? I think he was married her the longest, and then I forgot his first wife. I can't remember her name. I can't remember the second wife's name now, but yeah, she was a dancer. She was the second wife was a dancer,
A gifted dancer, yeah.
right? And he basically made her stop dancing because she got a major part in West Side Story, the original Broadway production, and he made her quit it.
He made her quit.
Yeah, he made her quit. Yeah, I forgot that the movie is based on Miles Davis.
It felt like it too.
Yeah, because Miles Davis is notoriously difficult, and Miles Davis had his own self-destructive issues, you know.
But in Frank Sinatra Jr., Frank Sinatra's son was in it also.
No, I'm sorry. Cissy Tyson was his fourth wife. His fourth wife. His
Ooh.
third wife was Betty Davis, the rock singer.
Oh.
The rock singer, Betty Davis. Not to be confused with the actress, Betty Davis, the rock singer.
Oh, no.
Who was a real ahead of her time. Really ahead of her time. We showed a documentary about her back 2 years ago at Black Harvest. She was very much ahead of her time. You can look her up, Betty Davis. Yeah, she was his third wife, right? She was the one who started getting him wearing those clothes like the big sunglasses and the shirts and all that stuff. That's all Betty Davis, you know.
What were your thoughts about the writing in A Man Called Adam? I thought it was superb.
No, the writing is great, you know. It's really well done picture, you know. It's like I said, it was a small independent movie, so it wasn't going to be seen in a lot of places at that time.
Was it critically acclaimed?
I don't know. I have to look up the reviews.
Okay.
I have to. I didn't even bother to look. Because what to care? If a movie works for you, I don't care what anybody said about it, unless they agree with you.
Whoa! Let's look. Okay, look at this. Okay, I'm reading IMDb. This is a review. 9 stars out of 10.
No. I mean critics' reviews. Don't read reviews of people.
Oh.
I mean, those are people who who just you and me. People have seen the movie.
Yes.
I mean, critically review. I don't know. I don't know what the critics said about it. I have to look it up.
There's 2 reviews. JB Spins, Joe Bendel, and Jamie S. Rick. DVDTalk.com.
Yeah, they're film critics at the time.
These are film critics.
I tell you what. For what paper?
It says JB Spins of these are not like consumers. These are like, it says critic reviews.
Well, yeah. That just means people who have seen the movie. It's a critics reviews. I can go right next door and look up what the review was for it. I mean, I'm in the next room. I can go get the New York Times review of it.
Really?
Because I got the book. Yeah, yes, I collect the New York Times book film reviews. Here, give me 10 seconds.
Right.
I'm gonna go get it. Okay, and tell me the date the movie opened in New York. Okay.
Okay.
Look it up on IMDb. The date the movie opened in New York. I'll be right back. Okay.
All right. Okay.
Okay.
The movie was extraordinary. Sammy Davis Jr., he conveyed such vulnerability. He conveyed a sense of being in a turmoil and love towards Cissy Tyson's character.
Okay, I'm back. Now, let me show you something. Okay? See this?
Yes.
Okay, this is New York Times reviews 1959 to 1968.
Okay.
This is it. This is every review that was ever published in the New York Times. I also have the editions. I keep these books. I have them up to 1976. You know, this is the way they appeared, and they simply recreate them. Now, why do I collect these things? It's because my favorite area of movies are 1960s and 70s. It's the greatest period of filmmaking ever. And in New York City at this time, every single movie that was ever released, whether it was big or small, independent, foreign, opened in New York. And I'm curious. I want to know about these pictures. I want to know, I mean, movies I've seen, movies I heard of, I haven't seen yet, movies I'm discovering for the first time. And New York Times reviewed them all. And there was a critic, well, New York Times, because so many movies opened in New York, and they were open on any day of the week back then. Okay.
Oh,
Back in this time, there was no summer season. Okay. Movies were open on Tuesday, they were open on Thursday, they were open on Saturday. It didn't matter. Okay. There was no summer film season. That happened after Star Wars and everything. And then also a lot of movies that opened never played anywhere else. So anyway, give me the date that the movie opened.
okay.
Okay.
All right. See, y'all, Sergio is no joke. He's a real film nerd.
Okay. I'm gonna say I'm just.
He's a real film enthusiast.
Yeah, that's better than nerd.
Okay. I'm a film nerd.
Okay. What day did it open?
1 second. Still up in New York.
Okay.
Yes, film enthusiast does sound cooler.
Okay.
19. I don't see. It doesn't specify. Let me see. Maybe Wikipedia.
No, hold on. Let me see.
Because I put in the
because
open.
Well, let me go to IMDb. Hold on.
Okay.
Sorry about that, folks.
It said release date July 29, 1966, Detroit, but that's Detroit.
No, I need New York.
Yeah. United States, it says August 3rd. It doesn't.
No. I need New York. I can. You have to. It's a little tricky. I know where to go. Okay.
Okay.
If I go up, hold on. If I go up to IMDb, it'll look here in the date. December 7th, 1967, Hungary. Well, Hungary. Now, click on that date. Then it'll open up and show me the date. Okay, so USA, New York City, August 3rd, 1966. Okay, so that means on August the 4th, there was a review. Okay, so, okay, on the 4th, there was a review. Here we go, Man Called Adam. The review by Howard Thompson. And the picture fails, although it tries hard in some ways admirably. Can't pronounce that word. Let me see. Okay, here we go. The story piles on woe after woe. At the peak of his career, the hero trumpeter is a petulant, undisciplined man who starts churning downhill in some kind of self-torment. Eventually, we learned that Davis has smashed the car. Cicely Tyson. The developing romance of these two is the most natural. I'm just skipping around here. Here we go. Is the President Cicely Tyson. The developing romance of these two is the most natural, disarming aspect of the entire picture.
True.
The best single moment occurs when Davis and young Frank Sinatra Jr. as his protege in the trumpet street at the cheering balcony in the segregated theater. Oh yeah, there's a good scene. Besides the high intensity of Mr. Davis's performances, some of the other acting is strictly tentative. Mr. Sinatra looks stunned. Miss Tyson improves with each scene. Johnny Brown is quietly effective as the blinded musician, and the other Mr. Davis, Ozzie Davis, is excellent as usual. But it's hard to appreciate a paranoid hero who is his own worst enemy, with more collective misery than even he can shake a trumpet at. So it basically, it's sort of mixed positive, you know?
It is.
But he doesn't like the character, right? Why does he like the character?
Because I like the character.
Because he's a tortured black man. You know, he's
and
a black
not passive.
Right, he's not passive. That made Howard Thompson maybe a bit uncomfortable. You got to read between the lines here, okay?
Oh, I know what he's trying to say on the
Okay.
low.
So that's what the New York Times said about the movie. I skipped around. It was
Okay.
much long. I just skipped
Okay.
around. But that's an idea. That's what they saw in the picture at the time. But it
Because
let
you,
me
as an audience member, you are exhausted at the end of the movie. You
yeah,
are
well,
emotionally drained.
yeah, it's not a film that is supposed to be a good time. I hate to say that. It's not supposed to be a good time.
Yeah.
It's a character study. A character
It's
study of a very disturbed person.
it's a
A
very
guy with a lot of issues.
it's a
He
solid
has
character driven piece.
yeah, he's a tormented person because of the personal life. He's dealing with racism. He's dealing with the business, you
Mhm.
know.
He,
And I just said,
he didn't want to be exploited as a musician. He was like, I'm not having this exploitation. But then
and Sammy Davis
he had to eat humble pie too.
had that personally. Personally, he had endured a lot of that. You know.
Sergio, there's this.
That's why I say he didn't have he really had to do much research because he lived it. Just like I said, and I said, somebody said that the reason why the performance is so good is because they had African American actors who had lived it. Okay, a friend of mine, I think I said this last time. A friend of mine saw the New York performance. She saw the London performance, right?
Mhm.
She said the New York performance was extraordinary. The London performance was technically well acted, but they missed it because they don't know it. Right.
It's the
Right.
nonverbal communication that you won't catch if you're
Right.
not of that experience. Period.
Right. They won't. You can't if you haven't lived it. You don't know it. Right. So that's why technically it may have been all right, but there was no depth there because let's be honest. What does a Black British, maybe a Nigerian or West African descent actor know about performing in a segregated business in Chicago in 1929? You know, and you don't have anyone else who can tell you the history of it. You sure can't. You sure don't. You don't have. You sure you sure your Nigerian parents or grandparents can tell you what it's like to be a Black American in the 1920s? You know,
No.
neither could a person an actor who from Haitian descent. I mean, or Jamaican descent. They couldn't tell you. They couldn't tell you.
And vice versa. We can't
Right.
tell them.
That's like Small Axe. Small Axe is terrific. Small Axe is incredible. That series on Amazon that Steve McQueen did. But you put African American actor in that film, it would have been an outrage. What do we know about Black life in England in the 1970s? We don't know anything about it. I don't know anything about it. Do
Yeah.
you?
No, because my curiosity has not taken me there.
Right. I'm fascinated now. I really am.
Because of the movie.
Really interesting, I mean, the Mangrove Nine and that stuff. Well, that's an interesting story. I never heard of the Mangrove Nine. Everything's a big deal among Black people in England. I never heard of it. Of course, we're not British. I don't know it. That's why it should have been always did. They had all British actors. It's the way it should be. The way it should be. There are some parts that anybody can play. Anybody can play.
Yes.
A superhero.
Yes.
A character.
Yes. Agreed.
Any part can play. But if you with a character who is specifically African American,
yeah.
Okay. Or you're dealing with a character who is specifically British, okay. Okay. It's like, what's this show? Bridgerton? Yeah, look, brothers are not checking out for Shondaland. I ain't watching it. Okay. So, but I it's true. We ain't checking for that thing. I see my friends, women posting pictures of Bridgerton and this guy on the show. And I said, brothers ain't checking for Bridgerton. Sorry, we're not. Okay, I'll give you another example. This great show on Netflix, Lupin, with Omar Sy. Okay, that's a terrific show. And it's right that a French black actor should play that part because it's based on a legendary French character. Actually, he doesn't play the character. He plays a character who's inspired by Arsène Lupin. And Arsène Lupin is this, like the British have Sherlock Holmes, or Lupin is this gentleman thief. And there have been like dozens of books written about Arsène Lupin. Okay. And there have been movies, French movies, and there have been TV series. And now this Netflix has this brother, Omar Sy, who's playing this guy who's inspired by Lupin and calls himself that, but he's not Lupin. But it's right in a way that a French actor should play it. Who knows what people here know about Lupin? We don't know anything about Lupin. Never heard of it. Well, I have. I've heard of Lupin. And that show is one of the biggest, after Bridgerton, it's the most watched show on Netflix.
I've heard at least 2 or 3 men in my circle have suggested I watch it.
It's good. It's good. I mean, he's a gentleman thief. And what it is that he is, you gotta watch the show. I don't want to give it away.
No, I'll probably watch it tonight.
But he's a guy who is inspired, but you have to see the show. But when he's a young child, his father gives him a book on Arsène Lupin. And now he becomes this thief, but it's an involved story involving a necklace, and it's a revenge story, and it's everything else that's in G. And Omar Sy, who was in, one of those Jurassic Park movies, and I'll tell you a funny story about it, okay? And he was in one of the X-Men movies, but he's a French actor, okay? And I think he's Senegalese, okay? A funny story, but I met him. This is after Jurassic Park came out. When they started doing the new ones, he's in the first one, right? So in the movie, there's a situation where he's being chased by these dinosaurs, right? And the movie leaves, you don't know where he goes. And in the end, you find out he's alive, right? He made it, okay? So I saw the film at screening, and the audience applauded when he saw him at the end of the movie, right? Because the brother lived, right? Okay. I met him about, a few days after I saw the picture, okay? He was in Chicago. And I told him the story. I said, everybody was cheering for you when he saw you in the movie. And he looked at me, he didn't know what I was talking about. He looked at me, he was like, because he's French, he doesn't know. And I had explained to him, okay, you see, we here in America, black people, when we see a brother still alive at the movie, we rejoice, and then he got it. Okay.
Oh, okay.
He got it. But at first he was like, why would they applaud? Because we're happy to see the brother still living. Oh, okay.
American cinema.
Right. It's a different thing, friend. Yeah, but you check it out. You check out Lupin. It's really quite good.
I will check it. I have to say too, so I remember one scene, isn't there a scene in A Man Called Adam when Sammy Davis Jr. character fights a police officer?
Yeah, then when they go to the house, remember? When he's in his place out in whatever it is.
In the cabins.
Right. Well, it's like a house. It's not
yes, you're right. Yes.
Like a really nice house.
What?
And, right. And the police come in and they arrest him thinking he and Cicely Tyson are squatters. You broke into the place.
Right.
Right?
Yes.
Right. And I saw like that was pretty daring. That was really
what did Sammy remind the audience what did Sammy Davis do when he interacted with the cops? Did he fought them, right?
Yeah, he fights them off. Yeah. Well, they take him in. And then eventually, he has his payback when he goes to the police station. But yeah, he tries to fight them. They take him off, right? Because it was true back then. It was true today. You see a black guy in the house, you broke in. You don't how the black guy buy a house like this? What do you do? It's just like that black reporter who writes for the New York Times, and she said this happened last year. She was covering some Trump event, and she was talking to this white guy, and the white guy said, "Who do you write for?" And he said, "What?" He said, "I'm a reporter for the New York Times." And he says, "Oh, come on, you can't write for the New York Times. You know, ain't no black people writing for the New York Times. How do a lot of black people in the New York Times? Like, no such thing as white person writing for the New York Times. That's impossible."
So he basically showcases ignorance.
Yeah, but the white people do it all the time. You know, how do you afford this house? You can afford this house. Who do you think you are? You know, how'd you buy this car?
Sounds like envy to me.
Because well, yeah, of course it's envy. It's because like, how come this guy has everything, I got nothing?
That's on you,
right? Boy, if they had come with a white woman in his house, woo, they really would have. They probably would have killed him.
So we'll wrap this up. But
you want to talk about Mandingo? You want to do about it later?
Let's do that separately because I saw that movie and I was like, really?
Oh, you had to be there.
No. Yes, we had to be there. The next film reaction, we would talk about Mandingo. Okay.
You had to be there. Brothers standing up cheering. Brothers were standing up on their feet cheering at that movie.
So we will watch Mandingo, and then I already watched it. We're gonna talk, but we're gonna wrap this up. So if you were to give out of 5 stars, rate the movie, the writing and the acting, how would you give it?
I think it's a really great film. I give 5 stars. I think it's a really great picture.
I'm gonna give 5 stars across the board.
Hopefully, when this Kino release comes out next week, with my commentary, then more people will appreciate it, you know?
Yes.
Also, here's a trivia question. Everybody remembers that, talking about Sidney Poitier, everybody remembers that scene in Sidney Poitier where he slaps that white guy, right?
Yes.
Okay. Name me the first movie where he slapped a white guy.
Well, who did?
Sidney Poitier.
In the Heat of the Night.
No, it wasn't.
Was it where he was bound together?
He also slaps a white woman too, as well.
In which movie?
You don't know?
I do not. I give up. Who?
Band of Angels. Ever seen that picture?
No.
That's the film we should talk about one day.
Okay.
It's one of his earliest films. It's a film he did with Clark Gable.
Oh.
And it's a movie where he plays, and the reason I bring that up is because I just watched it the other night. It was on Turner Classic Movies again. I've seen it it's like the 3rd time I've seen this picture.
Let's do a film reaction to it.
It's a movie in which it takes place just before and during the Civil War. Okay. And
don't give it away. Don't give it away. Let's wait.
No. I got to tell you what the plot's about, right?
Okay.
Because it's about, Yvonne DiCarlo. Yvonne DiCarlo plays a woman who finds out when her father dies that actually her mother was Black. She was a slave, right? Mm-hmm. Now, the part's played by a white woman, okay? But slave, right? Okay. So she's sold and she's bought by Clark Gable, who's basically trying to do sort of like Red Butler again, but 20 years later. And he basically acquires her so he can be his new mistress. He lives in this big house in New Orleans. And Sidney Poitier plays, technically he's a slave, but he's not. He's really this guy who is Clark Gable's right-hand man, who runs his businesses, oversees them. Because Clark Gable is a very rich guy. And you have to see the picture because Sidney Poitier's character is really fascinating and really complex. Talk about complex. And this movie came out in 1957. And this movie is really, in a way, very daring for its time. And Poitier played a character rarely this complex. You have to see the picture. That's all I'm going to tell you right now. If you can find it, see it. Because we should talk about this picture because it passing, and this is movie. Okay, you know Sundance starts tomorrow, and there's a movie There's a movie they're premiering called Passing, which is based on
Mhm.
a novel
Mhm.
with um, Tessa Thompson and Ruth Negga. Okay,
Yeah, she's a Black
and
Irish woman.
yeah, and it was directed by Rebecca Hall. Okay,
Mhm.
now here's the weird thing about Rebecca Hall. Okay, now Rebecca Hall's an actress. She's a British actress. She's in a bunch of movies. I think she's in the new King Kong film. Okay, um, her mother was black. Okay, she doesn't look it. Okay, now let me explain something. This gets really crazy. Okay, Rebecca Hall's father is Sir Peter Hall, and Sir Peter Hall is one of, I think he's passed away. Yeah, he's dead now, but he was one of these great British stage directors. Okay, okay, and he was married to Maria Ewing, who was Rebecca Hall's mother. Rebecca Hall's mother, Maria Ewing, was black. She was a very light-skinned black woman, opera singer. I remember her very well. Maria Ewing, she's still alive. But Maria Ewing always sort of like passed herself off as white. Okay? Here's the other thing. Sir Peter Hall was famous for not hiring black opera singers in his productions. So I think that's kind of really screwed up. So Peter Hall's married to a black woman. Yes, she's very light skinned, but she's not going to pass away. Uh, but he's not going to hire black singers for his opera productions. But his daughter now has made a movie about passing. It all gets very crazy, doesn't it?
Well, I mean, but racism is about economics, you know. So, so I'm not surprised. I'll sleep with you. I'll even procreate with you, but I don't want you to have economic empowerment. So I'm not surprised.
Yeah, I mean, I assume that Maria Ewing sang in his, yeah, I'm sure he did, sang his opera productions that he staged. But then again, she kind of passed herself as white, so maybe that was okay. I don't know. It's all kind of screwy. So, but maybe the next movie, okay, this is the next thing is, Mandingo. I gotta talk about Mandingo.
Yes.
And maybe Band of Angels. I really want you to check out Band of Angels. It's a really fascinating movie that's at times backwards, but at the same time, really forward thinking. It's an interesting picture.
Okay.
And Poitier plays, and a lot of people don't know about this picture, but Poitier plays a character who's really complex.
Okay. Let's
really
do it.
complex. And the final scene Poitier has, which is really next to the final scene in the movie, I think it's really great. It's really great. It's Poitier and a white officer, and it's a really funny scene. Okay. Because, well, I won't give it away.
No, don't give it away. Because I haven't seen it yet. So I want to watch. I want to check it out.
And a lot of people don't know about this picture. And I think it's a shame because it's a fascinating picture. Really is.
Okay, cool. So we're going to wrap this up. I would highly, highly, highly recommend you all checking out A Man Called Adam. The acting is superb by Sammy Davis, Sissy Tyson, and the other actors. The writing is superbly Lester and Tina Pine, also of Claudine. It's beautiful jazz music. It's a win-win. So I hope you all enjoyed our discussion about A Man Called Adam and the other films that are connected to that era and those kind of themes. So chime in under this video if you've seen A Man Called Adam and what you liked about it, or if there were any cons. Chime in under the video, and you guys have a great weekend. Sergio, go ahead and plug anything you're doing so people can follow you.
Well, once again, we talked about the movie, so now you have a chance to see it. It comes out next week on
Blu-ray.
Over the Blu-ray of A Man Called Adam in its correct aspect ratio. A lot of times it's been sort of cut on the edges. Correct aspect ratio is a brand new restored, HD master of the movie with my commentary. I hope I did. I hope I did the film justice. I hope I did.
I'm sure.
There's a lot to unpack in that movie. There's a lot to unpack on that film.
Mm-hmm.
And we'll see what happens next time.
Okay, cool. And for me, again, I'm China El Costin, also known as Chinese actress, indie filmmaker. You can download or stream my film Sweet Thing. You can also buy t-shirts by going to my website, or you can see my movie Dark Seed on Amazon Prime. All right, everybody, have a good night. Take care. Peace. Chinese.
Bye-bye.
Bye.